one. We will go ahead and call official start time. Let me make sure my volume is up here. All right. So we'll give you all a minute or so to go ahead and place your name and your campus in the chat. The other thing is make sure that your first name and your last name appears how it appears on Forrest's roster. So you may need to change, your screen name. So make sure that your name and your campus is in the chat. And then also that your screen name, your first and your last name appears how it appears on Fortis's roster. If you're going through a name change and the official change has not occurred on Fortis's roster, list it how it is actually listed on Fortis's roster. So good evening. We'll give you all a minute or so to do that. So it is so very important to ensure that your names are in your campuses are in the chat, and also that your screen name shows as it appears on Fortis's roster. So there won't be any discrepancies or mistakes made when the attendance administrators look at the roster and video recording. There will be no doubt that you were present. Okay, I think everyone has placed their name there. So good evening again to everyone and welcome. So as a reminder, and I will say this, that each session, these sessions are recorded and they are viewed by the attendance administrators. Ensure that you are adhering to the video recording policy, ensuring that you don't have blur on. Make sure that you are not in a vehicle, that you're not in a healthcare facility, any of those prohibited places, because we don't want to violate HIPAA and we want you to be safe. So just make sure that you remember, recall all of those things. And our slides should touch on those things as well. So welcome to transitions, or as some of you I may have heard of the class is leadership. Let me share my screen here. We'll go ahead and get started. So every time that you log in, you will have opportunities to, attend live exam reviews, and that will be with the other professors. So each time, just get in the habit of placing your name and campus in the chat. In addition to that, when you log into the live exam reviews, they want you to also put your professor's name in there as well. All right. So good evening to everyone. Hopefully everyone is doing well. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started viewing our orientation PowerPoint. I am Dr. Ford. Let's see here from the current slide. All right. So this is the January 2026 term. This PowerPoint will be made available and as the recording as well, because sometimes you'll need to refer back. So you still can take your notes, but just know that this recording and the PowerPoint will be made available. And all of these things come from your handbook as well. So what is online learning? To me, the only difference in online learning is that we're not sitting in the same physical space, the same expectations. You're expected to, come, do your best, to take ownership of your learning by participating, by preparing, and doing all those things. And with that being said, we use the computer, we use your internet. We do have interactions as you, other students from campuses all around. We even do have a group project. So you'll be expected to interact with others, just like when you go to your clinical rotation or you go to a job, you really don't know who the people are until you get there and you start working with them, and then they be your work family. So, but other than us not being in the same physical space, the same expectations are there. Being respectful, on time, doing your best, reaching out when there are issues or you have concerns. But the online learning means using a computer and the internet access to participate in your educational program. The online instructor, we have interactions throughout the course. We use online resources. We're using SurePath. And I'm not sure how many of you, if this is your first 2.0 class, but we use SurePath. So that might be new for you all. but we'll talk about it a little bit more as we go along. That's a new resource that we haven't used in the other courses, but it is being used with the 2.0 classes. The online instructor provides students guidance and leads to learning activities. The instructor provides feedback to the students about the progress. The online courses include homework assignments and learning activities. There are also quizzes. There are 3 exams. Then there's the HESI, and then there's 5 quizzes. And we'll talk about the breakdown of those as we move forward in this presentation. You are responsible to complete the required coursework every week. You will meet students from other campuses and locations. So for any issue, and this issue can be any issue, you all, no issues too big or too small. Computer access, there's questions about connectivity. There's something going on right then and now with you, your family members, or whatever the issue is. You want to start with the instructor. And this goes for all of your courses. Please, communicate early on rather than after the fact, because we can identify resources, point you in the right direction. If we don't know the answer, of course, I'm going to point you to our course lead. And if Dr. Tenza doesn't know, of course, we're going to bring in your campus dean and also Dean Brown, the online dean. So your course instructor is the first point of contact. So in order to, for the most part, you can jot down about our information, our contact information, but you can go to the About Your Instructor tab that's in Canvas. On my end, it's at like the top up there, but it says About Your Instructor. If you want to know the email, our office hours, or anything like that. And also, the course lead and Dean Brown information is there also. I mean, you can jot it down now, but you can also go to that tab if you need to refer to it. For continued concerns in your online courses, our team lead is Dr. Tenza. And then, of course, Dean Darlene Brown is the dean, the online dean. Now, each campus has their own dean as well. So you have at least 4 people, myself, Dr. Tenza, Dean Brown, and your campus dean. And probably 5, because each campus, from my understanding, also has an associate or assistant. So at least 5 people. So you do need to just make sure that you have their contact information, all of our contact information readily or at hand. You can just, save it in your phone or somewhere that you can get to it, just in case an issue pops up and you need to communicate something to us. But your campus instructor is the first foremost, and then your campus dean is the person of contact. So communication etiquette and netiquette. You want to state your thoughts courteous, being positive in a respectful manner. There are sometimes we're discussing concepts and, you may have a different viewpoint or understanding. It's okay. This is a safe place. We encourage you to discuss it, voice it, but we're going to bring you back and provide the correction and be receptive to it. We can disagree, and it's okay, but we're going to still be respectful to each other. We want to be mindful of how we express humorous and emotional statements, because sometimes those statements I might not mean anything by it, but it can be misinterpreted, and then it can be seen as being disrespectful or negative towards someone. So you want to keep our comments relevant to the discussion topic. For the most part, we just stay on script and talk about whatever the concepts are, because our time goes really, really fast. And you'll see here pretty shortly our first exam, but one of 3 exams are going to come up in 2 weeks, because this is week 1. So we really don't have much time to go off topic anyways. We do want to be considerate of others and their experiences, their feelings, and their perspectives. We do want to use proper language, not using slang, because different things mean different things. And I might not know, or someone else might not know what your interpretation is of whatever it is that we're talking about. So we just want to just use whatever the proper language that is to be used. Do not type messages in all caps. Of course, this gives the impression that you're yelling. So just take the time to take the caps off and type whatever it is that you need to communicate. The online courses have specific start and end times. Your classes are scheduled on a specific day with a start and an end time. And we'll talk about this in a couple more slides about Why is it important about the specific start times? End times, we do have break time during our classes, and most of the time, students like to push most of that time towards the end. But the specific start time, we want to be on time. And if I think D Brown and your campus things have pretty much looked at and worked out if there were some overlap. But if they did not, for example, there were some students that had clinical that overlap with some of their classes. We think we've worked all of that out. But if it has not been worked out, please send an email so that we can get that worked out, because there are specific start times, and we're going to talk about it in another slide. So just put that in the parking lot. So classes are mandatory live. We have mandatory live sessions, just like just like your campus classes. We meet one day a week. So if you miss that one day, that counts for like a whole week of absences. So it's really, really important. It's mandatory that you attend the live sessions. Now, there is an exception where there is not Kaplan is another review that's occurring, and we'll look at that before we end tonight. On some campuses, it's not all campuses, they have some type of review sessions on campuses. And so we know that you all will be at those sessions instead of your classes, but it might not interfere with this class, but I'm sure it's going to interfere with one or the other. But otherwise, all sessions should be attended. Course activities will include projects. We do have one group project in this class, lesson activities, adaptive quizzes. And with those adaptive quizzes, with this 2.0, it adapts it based on your responses. And then we do have those 3-unit exams, and then the HESI. Due dates are according to the syllabus week and posted in the course shells. We have 12 weeks. And week 11, and I'll say this more than one time, you all, week 11, just mark it on your calendar. More than likely, week 11 is going to look different than what your rest of the weeks have looked like. And we'll talk about that more when we actually look at the schedule, because that's the HESI week. And I say that because HESIs, most of the time, they're not given or taken during the time that your classes are regularly scheduled. So you do want to consider that, because you want to think about work, family, whatever other responsibilities that you have. So put a star or something by week 11, so you can look into that a little bit closer and further once we get closer to that week. So academic integrity, standards of student professional conduct. I'm going to take the time to make sure we read through all of this. And if you have any questions, you can please feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll stop occasionally and look and address any questions. So standards of student professional conduct, academic integrity, all incidences of academic dishonesty and violations of academic integrity will be disciplined. Such acts cannot be listed exhaustively. Here are some examples, but this just does not include all different things that consist of or would be marked as academic integrity, dishonesty. So cheating, plagiarism, submission of work of another person for credit, or failure to properly cite references for any work which is not original to the student, copying the work of others, allowing another student to copy from the student. So let me just take a little time with this right here. Submission of work of another person for credit. So how does that happen? Someone's copying from something? Yes. Sometimes, I don't know what happens, but students copy the person's name and all of that. Remember that submission, and this goes for just good school health altogether. If you have completed an assignment that's similar, because sometimes, some of the classes kind of sort of like mid-surge, and then you come to leadership, it's some of the same topics. So if you have submitted a similar assignment, or you use a reference, the same reference, you want to make sure that you properly cite that reference, because what's going to happen if you copy and paste that same paragraph or whatever it is, and you submit it through the checker, then it's going to pick it up as plagiarism. So you want to ensure that you properly cite it. You might even want to paraphrase it again, but for sure, properly in text inside your project, and also make sure it's listed on that reference page. especially if the topic or the concept is similar, or if you are repeating a course and you're completing the same assignment, make sure that you just take the time to go back and rework it and make sure that you're properly citing it. Because if not, it's going to be deemed for plagiarism. Because that plagiarism checker, gives you that score from 0 to 100. It's going to pick it up. So, unauthorized use of notes or materials in exams, including talking to other students, making sure that you're not taking pictures of things, posting it on the internet, and things like that, forging or altering assignments, unpermitted collaboration, giving or receiving aid on take home exams or other academic assignments under circumstances in which a reasonable person should have known that such aid was not permitted. So we'll kind of talk about this reasonable person too, once we talk about our concepts of neglect and the torts and intentional torts. We'll get into that because you, as a healthcare provider, they will, in the event that a patient or something goes to a lawyer, they look and see, were there any duties that were breached, and they ask the question, well, would a reasonable nurse, healthcare provider, should they have known? Should they have known that? So that's based on they go back and look at your training and all of that stuff. So let me read this again. Unpermitted collaboration, giving or receiving aid on a take-home exam or other academic assignment under circumstances in which a reasonable person should have known that such aid was not permitted. Okay, allowing others to copy or use work that is not his or her own, providing answers from graded assignments to others. So, and I want to pause here and say, if you're having connectivity issues, put a message in the chat and just keep logging back in. In the event that I lose you all, because you just never know with this internet now. Sometimes it's spotty, storms are coming. Sometimes it's a clear day, and something just happens with the internet. So if I lose connectivity, you all just stay right there. I'm gonna log back in, maybe on a different device. And if you're losing connectivity, put a message in the chat too, and just keep logging back in, and or send an email. So we'll have everything documented. So when the attendance administrators look at, the time that was in class, we'll have supportive documentation that says, hey, this student did say that something was going on with their connectivity. All right. So sites that promote cheating. Use of these sites does not promote honor, ethics, or integrity. These sites are being monitored. I don't know who does it. Just like I tell you that, make sure that you put your name and campus in the chat. Make sure that your first and last name on the screen appears how it appears on Florida's roster. The attendance administrators, whoever this person is, this is real, you all. Someone does monitor these sites. Don't even be curious and click on it just to see what's there. Just stay away from it. Being found on these sites will place you on a heightened monitoring of your work for academic integrity violations. Referencing these sites or submitting work found on these sites will result in a 0 for the assignment. This may be enough to cause a course failure, just depending on where your grade is. A second incident involving these sites will result in a course failure. Utilizing these sites, posting and downloading will put you at risk of being dismissed from the program. Your campus and your upper administration will be involved. Just stay away from these sites. So they have some listed here, but there's so many, they can't list them all. So we just ask you to just use your resources that are in the course shell. If they are not in your list of resources in your course shell, do not use them. Some examples of sites to stay away from are Stutco or Stuco, Course Hero, Stuvia, and like I said, there's too many to actually list here. So we just ask that you just stay aligned with your resources that are in your course shells. Use of artificial intelligence, AI, may only be used as approved by instructors on selected assignments. Students must disclose all AI use and must submit their original work along with the AI enhancements when the assignment is actually submitted for grading. Students may not submit only AI generated assignments. So you must disclose what AI that you use and your original work. Can't just turn into AI. But before then, we have to talk about, discuss it, and you have to gain approval to actually to use the AI. So the American Nursing Association Code of Ethics for Nurses, and this is the Code of Ethics serves the following purposes. It is a succinct statement of ethical values, obligations, duties, and professional ideas, and nurses individually and collectively. It is our profession's non-negotiable ethical standard. It is an expression of nurses' own understanding of its commitment to society. And we'll talk about ethical principles here, I think today. So, but we're here to provide the best care for our patients, no matter what their pay status is, no matter what their status is. We're just here to provide that. That's what we're signing up for as a healthcare professional. If the person comes in, once a week through the ER because they haven't taken their medicine, the person comes in, whatever their status is, we still are going to provide our obligations to provide that professional care to that client. All right, attendance in the online courses. So attendance will be recorded during your assigned live sessions. Log in. Just get in the habit of placing your name and campus in the chat. When you attend the exam reviews, also put your professor's name, but we'll give you that reminder. But for class, your name and your campus. Make sure that your screen name has your first and last name as it appears on the roster. If you're going through a name change and it has not officially changed on Fortis's roster, list your name as it appears on the roster. Because we don't want the attendance administrators to get confused and think that you were not in class and you really were there. So make sure that you adhere to whatever's on that roster. Attendance is taken by the instructor during the live session. If you log in and you go to the waiting room, it's timestamped. You're there. To be counted as present in the class, students must sign in with their full names. Be on camera the whole time. Camera should not be pointed toward the ceiling. We will stop and take breaks. And even then, the recording will still play, but you can be off camera then. But otherwise, you should be on camera. The camera should not be on and pointed toward the ceiling or toward the floor so that we can't see you. Anyone at work, driving, or in a healthcare setting, hospital room, doctor's office, will be removed from the session. Please, this is not safe for you to be at work and driving, and then we don't want to violate HIPAA by being logged in during class time. Anyone not coming on camera after being asked to will be removed from the session. We'll put a little message in the chat. Hopefully you'll come on camera. Faculty will verify students' time in class by reviewing the login, the log out times on Zoom. Zoom is timestamped. Even if you have connectivity issues and you keep dropping off, you log back in, all of that is timestamped. And you do want to make sure, usually the Zoom is open at least 5 minutes prior to class time. You log into that waiting room, you're in. Attendance missed will be recorded in 15-minute increments. So we're going to go a little bit deeper into what that means on the next couple of slides. Anyone without posting attendance 14 days in a row. So remember, all of our sessions, we only meet once a week. So if you are absent twice, that means you're absent for 14 days. 1 week, one absence equals 7 days. So anyone without posting attendance 14 days in a row, for us is only 2, will be dropped without notification. There is no makeup for missed attendance. So make sure if there's some issues, I mentioned earlier about the overlap with the clinical. We think we worked that out, but any issues, please communicate that so we can work all that out. Because that might just mean that you need to be in a different section on a different day. So just make sure you communicate that, because over time, that 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes late, it adds up. These next couple of slides, we'll talk about that. Attendance policy for nursing courses. Attendance is taken daily in class by the instructor and turned over to the registrar, the attendance administrators, before the end of the class on that day. So once we finish, we send the script and also the Zoom recording. So early departures, tardies, and class cuts. Like you log in and then you log out after 30 minutes, but you never log back in. That's a class cut. Will be recorded in quarter-hour increments. A period of less than 15 minutes will be counted as a quarter-hour absence. Attendance records are maintained by the registrar as part of the student's permanent academic record. Students with chronic absenteeism in excess of 20% of the scheduled hours for a course may receive a failing or reduced grade for the course. So students who are absent more than 20% of the scheduled time will receive a full letter grade deduction at the end of the term. So a student can have a B. What this means is if a student is absent more than 20% of the scheduled time, that B automatically turns into a C because that amount of time missed will drop a full letter grade. The online office will pull attendance weekly. A student who is at 5% scheduled time absent will receive an email through Campus View notifying them of such. So make sure that you can get in your Campus View. Make sure that you can log into your Outlook mail as well as you can get into the course. You can get into your Canvas mail, but make sure you can get into Campus View, your Outlook mail, and then of course your course. A student who is at 10% scheduled time absent will be required to meet with me and the instructor. So your deans, you got an online dean, you got a campus dean, and you have your instructor, then the campus lead, the course lead. A student who is at 15% of scheduled time absent will be required to meet with the campus administration. The level of intervention will be reliant upon the amount of time missed, and a student may not receive all warnings prior to missing the 20%. So make sure if you're missing, coming in late, leaving, class cuts, leaving early, make sure you're keeping up with that because once you get to that 20%, you will receive a full letter grade deduction at the end of the term. So just make sure in the event that you have something going on, make sure that you're communicating that early on to myself and your campus deans. So students must be appropriately dressed and groomed, portraying a clean, professional appearance. Make sure that you do not have on pajamas, anything that's see-through or revealing clothes. If the policy is not maintained, we will have to revert to the campus classroom policy of uniforms. The inappropriate use of legal substances such as vaping, tobacco, marijuana, and edibles, intolerant states, alcohol, and certain prescribed medications as determined by the Dean of Nursing is prohibited and will not be tolerated under any circumstances. Students are forbidden from vaping, smoking, using tobacco products, including oral tobacco, and using marijuana, even in tolerant states, while in uniform, including after-school activities and while in public. A lot of times, some of your clinical sites, you have to go and observe, and they're outside of the acute care setting. They're outside the long-term care setting. You may have to go to just different like doctor's offices, different centers and things around town. So just make sure if you're in that uniform that you know that you're not using any of these products. This projects a negative image of a healthcare program. Students are also forbidden from using these products while in their street clothes, on campus, or at their clinical site. Because sometimes there are some clinical sites that you don't have to be in your uniform, but you have your name tag. The virtual classroom is a classroom and it's to also be respected as such. So to be successful, you want to make sure that you're logging into Canvas at least 4 to 5 times a week to stay connected and engaged. Make sure that you're reviewing the course announcements throughout the week. Usually we post on Sunday. Every now and then there's something that comes up and we'll post it after that Sunday. So just make sure that you're clicking in and just making sure that you're aware of that keeps you abreast of what's actually going on with any updates. You want to review the course announcements throughout the week. Submit all the assignments on the week when they are due. So go ahead, and this is for all of your classes, you all. Every point matters. Every point matters. So, and we'll talk about this in probably the next slide about the turning in late work, but you want all of your points. So just keep that in mind. Towards the end of each week, review the assignments for the next week. Start looking ahead. Do not procrastinate. Procrastination is not our friend. And then after today, things move kind of pretty quickly, especially if you're taking more than one class, especially if you have clinical, especially if you have work, family, pets, and all of those things. Things kind of start moving pretty fast after today. So you want to start looking at your schedules, rearranging, deleting, putting things on pause, and just getting organized. And it's a fluid process. You're going to go back and look at your schedule because things change and you want to adjust things as needed. So day one of the term, you should have logged into Canvas. Log into Canvas by logging into your instructor, fortisinstructor.com. You should have opened up your online courses, click the instructor information. That is where you will find all of your instructors' information. That's a quick reference. Otherwise, just jot it down so you'll have it. You want to write down the instructor's contact information, the Zoom login, and we use the same Zoom login, whether or not it is class time, live exam review time, or if we're needing to just jump on Zoom outside of class time, I use the same Zoom login. And then you can look also and see what our office hours are as well. You want to print this syllabus out. You can make you some jot notes, and it can help you also get organized and rearrange things and kind of look at the big picture, especially, like I said, if you have multiple courses and clinicals as well. You want to review your course syllabus, particularly the detailed course outline, because it specifically tells you, what information, what concepts, what quizzes, when exams and everything will be. You want to confirm that you are given the correct textbook in addition. So we'll look at that once we actually look in the course shell. For some, it doesn't happen often, hasn't happened very often, but it has happened at least one time where the student had the incorrect text edition, and it does matter. So if it says on the syllabus fifth edition and you have sixth or fourth, then that's incorrect. Because if we're referring to page 5, for example, page 5, the graph on page 5, graph 5.0, then when you turn to page 5, your page 5 has a bunch of words on it. It doesn't have a graph. So that's information that you're not going to have. So it is important for all of your courses. Check your syllabus and then check your resources and make sure that that textbook edition is correct. If it doesn't match, then we'll need to contact the campus dean and put a help desk ticket in. They're pretty quick about responding. Okay. So questions, missing something, you want to contact your instructor. So we'll start the communication and we'll find out who we need to, if we do the help desk ticket or if it's directly to the publisher. We'll find that out. We'll look at that here in a few. So supporting your learning and other learning activities. You want to come to class prepared to discuss the concepts. Attend additional review sessions offered by the faculty. There are 4 of us, so we will have 4 different exam review sessions. At a minimum, commit to at least going back doing listening to the recording. We would love for you to attend, but we do know that we offer them all different times of days and then on different days of the week as well, because we do know that you all have other classes and other things as well. So we kind of mix it up. But at a minimum, even if you cannot attend the review session, commit to actually going in and reviewing it. Even though we're all talking about the same concepts, a lot of times it's just that repetitiveness. It'll stick with you. The light bulb will come on. It's like, oh, okay, well, I understand it now. And sometimes it is because we saying the same thing, but we just say it a little bit differently, like tomato. We're still talking about that round red vegetable. But because it's said a little differently or reworded or paraphrased, like, oh, okay. So we do encourage, at a minimum, making sure that you click each of those reviews and go back and listen to them. In addition to that, make sure you go back through our classroom recordings. I know after we take our first exam, you don't want you think you're done with week 1 and week 2, but remember you have the HESI, you have the NCLEX. So after that, you always want to go back and start looking at these things again and again. And then those things, the concepts that you have difficulty with, send an email. We can meet phone, we can meet on Zoom, or we can do an email exchange about any difficult concepts. You do want to schedule tutoring sessions. When you send the email, place your several dates and times in there, and then put your time zone, because some of us are in different time zones, so we can definitely make that happen. If you're having technical difficulties logging in, you do want to contact technical support, and also let me know what's going on as well. But technical support, they're pretty good about responding pretty quickly. I'm just stopping to make sure we don't have any questions so far. Are exam reviews mandatory? They are not mandatory. Nope. No, ma'am. They're not. They're strongly encouraged. If you attend, make sure you put your name, campus, and your professor's name. And then if you cannot attend, commit to um, reviewing them, clicking and listening to it at your lead. Even if you do attend, go back through them and listen at them again. Because remember, the bigger picture is you providing that best care for your patient, sitting for their NCLEX, passing it that first time, your HESI, and all of your exams, doing your best. For the last, I don't know, the last couple of years, we have been outscoring nationals on, I want to say probably with all the there might be like one category that we like right there, even with nationals, but because they've told us, hey, going back, attending those live exam reviews, if they couldn't attend, going back and just reviewing those and looking back at the classroom recordings, that it has helped. It has helped. And I forget which campus it is, but we were up to 21 students passing that NCLEX on the first try. I forget which campus it was, but I know you're thinking about your time, all those things that you have to do. But remember, this doesn't last forever. We just got to get past that NCLEX, the HESI, and these exams. And so even if you had to divide the time up, just make sure that you are reviewing the content. And no, they are not mandatory. They just are encouraged. All right, so we talked about the tutoring. Students that participate actively in these two interventions tend to have higher testing scores, as many as 20 points. So for those, if you identify a concept, hey, I'm just having a problem, understanding this, wrapping my head around it, can't make sense out of it, hey, send an email, do an email exchange, Zoom, and we have office hours. We do have a variety of options. The students have told us this. And in addition to this, I know you don't have NCLEX questions for this course. You might not have it for some of your other courses, but what they have also told us on that feedback that they give us at the end of the year, and they have come back to send us emails and say, hey, going over 2 or 3 NCLEX questions in addition to their learning activities, they think that has helped them prep and do their best on the NCLEX. Okay, so how is your work graded and how is it weighted? So we have a total of 100%. 80% of that comes from those 3-unit exams and that HESI, and then your quizzes. The correction, the 80% comes from the unit exams and the HESI. Then the 20% comes from the adaptive quizzes, the lesson activities, the group project, and then your professionalism evaluation. So unit exams, we have 3 of those. The first one is not next week, but it's week 3. And then, of course, specialty exams, as HESIs are always in week 11. They're all are there. So remember I told you put a pin or a star by week 11 because it's going to look a little bit different because you want to do your best. And then for your homework, you have those adaptive quizzes, those lesson activities, which will take place in SurePath. We have one group project, and students have to get really, really well with that because you're given time to work through it and get it all together. And then in addition to that, you have professionalism evaluation. And we'll look at that so you can know what's expected for that. So week 1 through 5, homework grades are turned off. 1 through 5 and week 8 up until the HESI remediation has been done. The homework grades are turned off. But on week 6, we turn the homework scores on just so that you can see the impact. And yes, your scores, most of the time, the grades go up during that week 6. But remember, which we'll look at here on the next slide here, your combined score on all unit exams and the specialty exam must be 78% without rounding or above before any credit is given for the homework. So what does that mean? So if a person has 77.777 on those unit exams in that HESI, then that is not 78% or above. So that means that's a fail for the course. Now, a student can have 78% or above, but then didn't do so well with their homework and those adaptive quizzes, and then the lesson activities and the group project, and then for the professionalism evaluation, that was less than the 78%, then that can cause homework, that 20% can cause a student to fail as well. So just keep in mind, just do your best. Every point matters. A minimum passing grade of a C plus, which is 78%, not 77.999, is required for successful completion of the course after the homework scores are added on. There's no rounding, you all. Okay, you must have 2 devices for each exam. Make sure you have, okay, chargers is on here too. You want the laptop to run the exam. We're gonna turn on the practice exam once ExamSoft is actually open. For the most part, if you haven't had received or gotten a new laptop, when you do the practice exam, it should be okay. But nevertheless, you do want to go through the practice exam. No matter if that's the same computer you've been using, because what we're finding with ExamSoft, they're doing updates, and sometimes that little update will not will bump heads, or not, your computer might not comply with the update, and we don't want any undue stress on the day of the exam. So make sure you have your laptop, your phone. Be sure that they both are fully charged, and make sure you have your chargers, because sometimes these devices, they be charged, and we're looking, especially you have that 75 minutes to take the exam, and sometimes our battery isn't as charged or strong as we think it is. So have that charger in reach. If you go off camera while in the exam, you will receive a 0 for the exam. No excuses will be accepted. So anytime that you're having connectivity issues, there are usually 2 of us, at least 2 people when exams are given anyway. So you'll be able to send it to myself or whoever's in the room with us. Just make sure that you're communicating. Disable anything on your computer that will turn your camera off in the event that it doesn't pick up activity, because sometimes there's some type of setting that will turn the camera off because it is not picking up any movement. You want to disable any of that, because you do not want that camera to go off. No scrap paper is allowed. Use a whiteboard or that sheet protector, and make sure you have your marker, because that sheet protector, it's just that clear thing you can write on and you can erase it off. And then usually if you use these at the end, when you finish your exam, you have to show it for the recording, erase front and back also. Okay. So exams will be scheduled and given through ExamSoft. We usually don't get access to ExamSoft until maybe like week 2 or 2, but we have to have it before week 3. So be on the lookout for that practice exam. You want to log into Zoom on your 2 devices. Make sure you have your chargers. Make sure you have your ID, which you're going to have your ID anyways. You should have it. So make sure you have that. That should be on during class time. You do want to sign in according to your ExamSoft instructions. You want to read the exam description carefully so you know the requirements. Begin the exam when you are ready. When you are finished, you want to click on the save and upload button. This doesn't happen very often, you all, but make sure that you do not close that device before we say that we can see it on our end. You close up that device, you click save and upload, but you don't really get the confirmation. The chances are that exam being lost in the cloud or wherever it goes is there. It didn't happen often. So just make sure that you are getting the okay on our side, that we can actually see that exam. Once you submit your exam, there's like a slight delay that but you'll get that confirmation screen. And then you want to make sure that you log out of the testing site. The exams are timed. So you want to make sure that you're using all the time that you need, as well as keeping up that you don't go overtime, because you do want to make sure that you're answering all of your questions. So you do want to pay attention to the time that you've used that you have left. Exams may not repeat it to improve a grade. So if you have any issue that may impact your performance, please discuss it with us before the exam and not after the exam. Any issue, you all, that can be anything, any issue. If it's something that's going to affect your performance, doing your best on this exam, please communicate it before the exam. Contacting us with issues after you have hit that submit button, you have removed any of our ability to work with you. If you're having connectivity issues, just whatever, if it's an issue, that's something that's going to prevent you from doing your best. There's no issue too big or small. The worst thing that could happen, take the exam at a later date and time. That's not too bad. I would rather do that than you take that exam and you just score something on it and you don't do your best. And then you get a grade that's going to negatively impact you. Please communicate whatever that issue is before you take that exam. Of course, we'll pass all the information, whatever's being communicated to the professor. We'll let Dean Brown know, and it can, and the course lead know, what's going on as to why you are not wanting to take that exam as scheduled. Any documentation that you can have, that you can get, would be great to put with that. So anyone with accommodations, even if you have, there are several of us that teach more than one course. So if we were together last term in a different course and you submitted your accommodation paperwork, submit your accommodation paperwork each term, no matter what if you've met the instructor before or not. So anyone with accommodations needs to notify your instructor of the same at the beginning of the term. So go ahead, if you have that paperwork, your instructions and everything, go ahead and turn that in, and we'll send that up to Dean Brown as well as your campus dean. If you think you need accommodations, I'm not sure what the process is, but contact your campus dean, get that process, find out what the process is and get that process started if that's something that you think that you need. Just because you had accommodations last term does not mean we know about it. So make sure that you send that to us this week. And accommodations can be an array of things. So just make sure that you're communicating with your campus deans and you're getting that done for you, because we want you to do your best. Notifications less than 10 days before an exam may not be able to be granted in time. There is a process that must be followed. So if you do not already have accommodations, but if that's something that you're thinking that you need, you can send that email tonight, so that this evening, so that that conversation can be started between you and your campus dean. I'm not sure what all paperwork the application process is, but our first exam is coming up in week 3. And of course, you have quizzes. The first quiz doesn't start, I think, until week 4. Exams are held during your scheduled class time. Exceptions only with written approval by your faculty and copy to the National Online Dean. Note taking, not taking an exam during scheduled class time will result in an absence. Lecture time is not able to be made up. Exams can only be proctored with a faculty member on campus with 72-hour notice and must be done during the scheduled class time. So usually the classes that kind of meet this late, in the event that you think, for whatever reason, we've had students for a variety of reasons why they need to take that exam on campus. You must communicate in writing to myself and your campus dean, include Dean Brown in it as well, 72 hours before the exam is set. And what this does, because we have to find a place, a person, we want you to have perfect testing conditions. So we have to have someone there to proctor it, and then a place, because for the most part, all the buildings and rooms are occupied. So we got to find a place and a person to proctor that exam. And we would need that 72-hour notice in order to get everything set up for you so that you can do your best. Proctor an exam outside of class time It happens. But the thing is making sure that you put it in writing with that 72-hour notice. Exams are on Zoom. Online, so we use Zoom as our platform. You must have those two cameras. You must be on camera the entire time with the profile view and face fully visible. This requires a second device. You must show your photo ID, which we don't need that anyways during class. So make sure that you have your IDs on. We'll take our first break here in about 10 minutes. So if you don't have your ID, make sure you grab that during the break. Failure to show photo ID or not be fully visible at any point may result in an exam and or course failure. Must show complete testing environment. We'll ask you to do your 360 view. That includes desktops, walls, all sizes of computers, chairs, floors in the testing area. You must show your ears, your wrists. If a tester has religious exceptions, please ask to discuss this issue with me. Appropriate accommodations will be granted. Do not assume that we know about individual requirements. Please communicate. Please communicate. Missed exams will be held to the late work policy. Exams missed without prior notice will be a 0. Exams missed for personal reasons will result in a late penalty with notification. Exams missed due to an emergency will require the documentation of an emergency. You're headed home, the tire goes flat. You had to purchase a new tire, you had roadside assistance, whatever documentation that will support whatever you had going on, just make sure you gather it. In the event that you're having to go to the urgent care, just go ahead and, for the most part, they go ahead and give you that work excuse. But just in case they forget, make sure that you ask for your documentation. This documentation must be submitted to the National Dean online. Notification must occur within that 24 hours of the scheduled exam. Documentation must be presented prior to the exam being rescheduled, and any exam not rescheduled within 7 days of the class time will result in a 0. So you do have that 7 days. Like I was saying, in the event that you have an issue, whatever that issue is, make sure you're communicating that. So are you all talking to me about the time the class ends, or is that something are you all asking about the time class ends? In Campus View, when I
Ma'am,
looked
I
at
was
it,
asking you.
okay. So in my Campus View, it says the 8:27, but we usually push our most of our break time toward the end, and then we don't really end early. It's just we go on our break and we don't come back. So the first hour, usually at the end of each hour, we at least do 10 minutes, but we still have that other 15 minutes to take, and we usually leave it for the end unless there's something that's going on and we're just so exhausted, we have to take it before the end. So the official end time is 8:27, but most of the time we do have that 15 minutes cushion or at least 10 minutes at the end to use to go on our break at the end. And so we don't call it getting out early. We're going on our break, which runs us to the end of class. Did that make sense what I said? Or
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
you're welcome. But yes, Campus View said it did initially say what was the time in there? 11. But
Eight
what happened?
eleven.
But what happened? They did not factor in years ago. At least I want to say we probably started this. We've been doing this at least 2 years now, where if a holiday falls on your class day, we'll go ahead and add that additional 10 minutes or 13 minutes. They figure it out because you're supposed to have so much seat time according to the board of nursing. Anyways, that's how they figure out how much time we're supposed to be in class. And so in the event that a holiday falls on the day that we meet, which we know the third Monday is an official holiday where all campuses are closed. In the past, what we did, we met on Saturdays, we met on alternate days, which kind of bumped heads with other classes and things you had going on. So what we found that has worked for the last couple of years, just divide it up times 12, and just add those few minutes. So it went from 8:11 to 8:27. So it added those extra, 15 minutes to the class. So what happens is you don't have to worry about logging in on that third week another day. You really just are outright out that day. So that's why that time changed, because we do have, I think that's the only holiday for this term. for this side. It's on that Monday. So if you have a Monday class, more than likely you do have a few extra minutes added. And it's so that you don't have to make up during that week. We just found that that has helped without having to log in later and log into someone else's class. It was a bunch of moving parts. It was just less challenging just to add those extra minutes in. All right, so let's see. Watch my time here. Got 5 minutes
What
before.
about the exam that's week 3,
Yes, it will be actually that next week.
the following week?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You're welcome, and we'll get to that. But good question. Yes, it'll be moved back. But then, with that being said, that next one is week 5. But we'll look at our schedule here before we end. So technical issues, we talked about that. Even during the exam, during class time, if you having technical issues, please just put a message in the chat. If you're taking an exam, I would stop and say, "Hey, I have a problem. Something going on with this computer. I don't know what's going on with my internet." Now it's up to you to push on or to stop. We recommend you do not continue or try to continue if you're having technical issues. Notify us immediately. There are 2 of us going to be in the class. There is room. We are in the room. Raise your hand or put a message to us. Don't send it out to everybody. Just send it to either one of us. And then we'll verify, try to figure out what's going on. A lot of times we have to notify or call ExamSoft. And then usually they're pretty good about working out whatever the issue is. Let me pause right here. Some of you all have switched sections because there were I know one section that was canceled from Tuesday. And then because of some clinicals, you all had to switch sections. When we turn on the practice exam, make sure that your course in ExamSoft matches the course that you are actually in right now. Because what has happened, it happened often with the changes. ExamSoft pretty much rolls over, but every now and then, I know there's been at least 1 or 2 students where it did not change their section. So on exam day, it let them do the practice exam, but on exam day, the code that we gave out, that it didn't match their exam. So because they were still in the other section that had been canceled or that they had switched out of. So when you do your practice exam, make sure that your course numbers do match. Like I think ours say at the top, it says ME something. Let me see what it says at the top. It says PIM 530. So make sure that matches because when you just glance at it, it looks like, okay, well, that's transition. But make sure that your numbers actually match because you can do the practice exam, but when you actually come on exam day, you can't take the exam because it has you in a different course, a different section. So you do, okay, here it is. Let's go over this again. If you have any issues, technical issues, do not try to take the exam. Of course, you always have a choice. We've had some students that push on, but whatever happens, is what happens. Whatever score you make is that score. I'd rather let someone know, hey, I'm having issues with this. We try to work it out. The worst thing that can happen is you have to take that exam on another day and time. But the thing is, you're going to do your best because that connectivity, when it gets to doing whatever it does, it can prevent, it might make you select the wrong answer. It might not even record the answers. All kind of things that go wrong. So do not continue or try to continue if you're having technical issues. Notify us. We're in the room. We will contact or ask you to contact ExamSoft. In ExamSoft, they'll look at everything. They'll see how many questions you went through. Sometimes it will ask you for that resume or that reassess code, but it'll give you that message, and you just let us know what it's telling you. Usually, we'll go in the breakout room and we'll work through it. Things faculty will not be able to do. We cannot allow a retake due to technical issues or any other issues, physical or emotional, when the majority of all the questions have been answered and your time has run, or either if your time has run out. So if there's an issue, technical, physical, emotional, please let us know prior to. So then, like I said, the worst thing could be is you taking that exam the next day or whenever is possible before that 7 day, rather than you taking that exam and something's going on and you're not doing your best. All right, so we're going to pause here and take our 5-minute break. I do want to let you know this recording still runs. You can go off camera, But just make sure that you're on mute, and we'll see you in 5. We have about 30 seconds. Coming on back. Let me check the chat just to make sure I've answered everything thus far. Again, if you have not placed your name in campus in the chat, please do so. Ensure that your screen name appears how it appears on the roster. In the event that you're going through a name change, make sure you put whatever name that is on the roster, that first and last name. So yes, you all let me know when you go into the restroom. Please continue to do so. And also, if you're having connectivity issues, exam reviews are not mandatory, but they are just strongly encouraged. In the event that you do attend one or all of them, make sure you're placing your name, campus, and your professor's name there. At a minimum, please commit to at least going through and reviewing the exam lab reviews and your classroom recordings. Remember, we're going over all the concepts, so make sure that you're taking time to go back through our classroom recordings as well. Yes, we talked about the time in Campus View. It's 8:27, that's Eastern time. Week 3 is a holiday, so you will be taking that exam on week 4. So that's if you're having any Monday classes. Everything for week 3 will be done on week 4. And I think that's it. All right, so let's go back to our screen. So again, I cannot stress, if you're having physical or emotional issues, any issue, because if whatever it is, if it's going to keep you from doing your best, so ask your question. Is this going to prevent me from doing my best? But you need to say something about it beforehand. Do not try to press on. Of course, if you do, we'll just support you in the decision that you made. But remember, you're more than likely not going to do your best. So communicate whatever it is. We don't hope anything happens to you. We hope our term go through without any physical problems or emotional problems or technical problems. But you just never know. So just this is a safe place, communicate it so we can advise you how to move accordingly. Specialty exams are given in a proctored environment on your campus. So week 11, make a note, because you have to consider, especially if you work, if you have family, pets, or whatever, week 11 is going to look a little bit different. That's the only week we do not log in during our regular class time. Your HESI exam, once we look in and see that you're taking the exam, that counts as your attendance. The HESI score remains after you've completed your remediation. So week 11, those exams are given on campuses. And if you're enrolled in one campus and your classmates enrolled at another, that HESI exam is going to look different from campus to campus. So you should be receiving information. It usually comes out no later than early week 10, but usually as early as week 9, that information comes out so that you can start planning, especially if you have more than one class. You want to be, making sure that you're arranging things so that, you can do your best. There is only one attempt on the HESI. HESI exams can occur anytime in HESI week. So for the most part, a lot of times what happens is if you have a Monday class during HESI week, you probably are scheduled to take that HESI on a Wednesday or a Friday. So that's why I say put that note, because HESI week, most of the times, your exam that week looks a little bit different. HESI exams can occur anytime in HESI week and are scheduled by the campus according to the campus availability. This exam counts as 20%. Remember, we talked about that Those key graded assignments, it counts as 20% of your testing grade. I want to refer back to that syllabus. The benchmark for this exam is 900. And we've had students, like I say, for the most part, for the last couple of years with leadership. I know this is a 2.0, but leadership overall. And we look at that too in week 12, at the previous years and terms, we really have outscored. So it shows that you're, putting the work in and you're taking the time to take ownership, identify those concepts you need assistance with. It shows. Remediation is mandatory. That is mandatory to receive your HESI score. You can get your HESI score, whatever it is, but that score is not valid until you complete the remediation. And remediation is time-based. So once you take the HESI, it populates these packets for you. Sometimes going through the packets, it will take the 3 hours. It may take the 1 hour or the 8 hours. But sometimes it doesn't. You still have to look in there and make sure that you meet your time requirement. For example, if you make a 801 and the packets that and I say packets, the information that it compiles for you to go through, you may finish it in 2 hours, but you made an 801, you still need to look at information and content until you meet that 3-hour mark. Remember, everything is timestamped. So it shows, how much time that you're in there on remediating. So remediation is mandatory to receive your HESI score. Remediation consists of completing 100% of the remediation times. And on the flip side, if you make a 801 and your packets require you end up spending 4 hours, which you went over the 3 hours, which is fine, because remember, you want to provide that best care for your patients. You want to sit for NCLEX one time and pass. So if you go over, that's fine, but you have to, at a minimum, look at your score and see how much time is required. Remediation consists of completing the 100% of remediation time. Time should be spent over all concepts with learning gaps. Time will be dependent upon your HESI score. And I gave you an example. If you made a 909, you have to spend that 1 hour. Remediation packets are to be submitted by 11:59 that Monday of week 12. So we usually can't turn on homework scores until after 11:59 because students are given that amount of time that it's a deadline to complete that remediation. Failure to complete 100% of the remediation will result in a HESI score of a 0. So if you made a 901 and you do not complete the 1 hour time requirement, that 901 turns into a 0. Okay, homework assignments. Submit your work on time. Go ahead, and you can always turn things in early. You have that time frame. But at a minute, if you can, avoid turning anything in late. Because what happens, 100%, a perfect product is going to equal 10% deduction. So the highest you can make on that would be less than 10%. So that the 100 turns into a 90. Automatic, that would be the highest that you can make because it is turned in 1 day late, 2 days late, all the way up to 7 days late. And then after that 8th day, 8 or more days, that assignment just can't be graded. Submit your work on time because every point matters. Just go ahead and turn it in on time. Late work is only accepted with prior approval from the instructor. So go ahead and, if in the event that things happen, we're not unreasonable, things happen. And so in the event that you see, oh goodness, this assignment is due today, earlier today, something happened. Go ahead and put it in writing. Hey, I'm almost finished, but I think I'm going to turn this in late. Can I get approval to go ahead and turn it in, even if it is going to be late? And usually approval is granted. We have that documentation, and you have up until that 7th day to turn it in with a 10% deduction. Okay, late work will not be accepted without prior written approval. So you have to put it in writing, and it says prior to. And then approved late work submitted by the student will be graded along with the other weekly submissions for the next grading period. So what that means is if my work for week 2, I've talked to my instructor, he or she says, hey, yeah, go ahead and turn it in. I understand what you got going on. And I turned in on day 7. I turned in on day 2. My perfect work is going to be 10% minus whatever that perfect score was going to be. That does not mean that the next week and the next week, those assignment dates are changed. My next week's assignments are still due when they are supposed to be due. So it does not push everything back. Because remember, we only have our 12 weeks. And then the other thing is, every point matters. Turn things in early if you can. Be for sure, at least by time, by the due date. Because remember, on the other hand, you can't give extra credit for anything because everything is set up so because you only have that certain amount of time. The lesson activities in SurePath cover key points from your reading assignments. Lessons include the text, micro quizzes. So along the way, it'll ask you 1 or 2 questions that have videos in it, and assessments that'll test your knowledge through the as you work through that lesson. Your instructor will have access to the dashboard that displays your students' performance and time spent on each lesson. The lesson activities represent 5% of your grade. 5% might not seem like a lot. Remember I said every point matters, you all. And then these activities, they build upon. So it helps you do well on the exams. It helps you do well on the HESI. It helps you do well on the NCLEX. So it all builds, it builds. So make sure that you're taking the time to go through the different lessons and the in-text and the micro quizzes and looking at the videos. Take notes from it. And then in the event that you don't complete those assignments on time within that 7-day window that you have on, that you do SurePath and you do these adaptive quizzes on your own. If it's not turned in or completed by the due date, it automatically gives you a 0 because it's not completed by the due date. Then we'll give, if you have that prior approval, of course, we'll give that window, and then we'll have to actually go in and pull the grade out. But if it's not completed by that due date that's already set up in there, it'll automatically push a 0. And then, if prior approval has been given, then we'll go in and we'll look at your work and then put the grade in minus the 10%. The adaptive quizzes in SurePath will cover concepts from your reading assignments. Each quiz has 50 questions. Quizzes are personalized because they're adaptive. So it takes the answers that you are selecting and adapts it to and tries to give you hints so that you can recognize and identify what the concepts, the correct answers are. Quizzes are personalized. That's where the adaptive part comes from to the student, and will help you increase your mastery of the content. So if you're getting them all correct, it's supposed to be, or the question is supposed to get a little bit more challenging, The quizzes are taken at home and they are not proctored. They must be taken in one session though. You will only have that one attempt on each quiz. So make sure it's 50 questions. Make sure that you have enough time. The adaptive quizzes represent 5% of your grade. So unlike our other courses, they had to be proctored. For this course, if you're taking geriatrics as well, care of the older population, it has adaptive quizzes in it as well. So those are not proctored. Okay, so then we have a professionalism evaluation. It counts as 5% too of your grade. So what is that all about? Professionalism is a key component of your success in the academic environment and in your career. Your instructor will submit a weekly assessment of your professionalism in Canvas based on these qualities. Attend all classes on time, where you engage in being respectful and constructive interactions with both peers and instructors. Sometimes we'll ask you all to put information in the chat. Everybody respond in the chat, or we'll ask you to come off mute. We'll put you in small group. We'll circulate through to make sure everybody's is communicating. Then we'll bring you back. So just make sure that that you're engaged, and then respect for diverse perspectives. We might not all agree, even though we're talking about the same thing, the same concept, but we may look at it differently, and it's okay. Adhere to guidelines. You want to follow the dress code. We talked about that. Make sure that you are not in pajamas. Make sure that you're not in revealing clothes and see-through clothes. Follow the dress code and the academic integrity rules as detailed in the student handbook, which we had that slide previously on it. And then you want to complete all assignments promptly, actively participate in the class activities. Respond in the chat. Log into the Kahoot if we have a Kahoot. Go small group, come back to large group, and discussions. Reach out to faculty with any concern or issue in a timely manner. So this is where your professionalism score, and you get this, you get 12 of these. This feedback is intended to help you measure your progress and identify areas for improvement. Our goal is to support you in developing the professionalism skills that are necessary for your future success. And again, that counts as 5%. So the group project will guide the development of professional goals relative to the profession. Students have done really, really good with those group projects. We'll talk about that as well here. Let's see, review and follow instructions. This is just showing how you see the assignment when you do like the module view. And then when you click the assignment, it gives you more detail. You do want to make sure that you're following those instructions that are on there. You want to actually grade your assignment before you turn it in. You know, you have the rubric. Look and see, do you meet all the components? Did I use APA? You know, do I have any spelling issues? You know, did the rubric say I needed 5 paragraphs? Okay, my first paragraph is there, my second one, my third. Ooh, I'm missing 2 paragraphs. So don't turn that in because, you know, go back and get all your points. Make sure you develop it. But look at your rubric, grade your own work and see if you meet all the components prior to turning it in. Because remember, every point matters. There's no rounding, and you have to have that outright 78% at a minimum. So we usually put some examples in the announcement section to help you with the APA, but using that Purdue OWL is pretty good. And make sure that you're using references that are within the past 5 years, because we want to use the latest information. We want to make sure that your research relates to your topic. For example, if you know the concept is about nursing leadership, make sure that that's what the paper or the project is about. You know, don't turn in the paper or the project and you're talking about shoes when it was about nursing leadership. You want to summarize the key points in your own words. You want to paraphrase. You want to give credit for ideas to the source. You want to cite your sources in text and then on that reference page. Because when we talked about it, that plagiarism thing will pick it up and say that you're plagiarizing. To be successful in this course, you want to make sure that you're communicating. You know, you all have been putting in the chat the questions. You have said that you were having to step away, that you're having connectivity issues. We talked about communicating early on in the event that if you're going to be late with even if you think you're going to be late, just go ahead and start communicating that. And so if you turn it on time, oh, well, you've got that prior approval. What that means, you turn in on time and there's a perfect paper, you keep all your points. You want to plan. We talked about those review sessions. They're not mandatory. They're strongly encouraged. At a minimum, commit to going back, looking at the recordings as well as our classroom recordings. If you need tutoring, that can take on the form of an email exchange, Zoom, on the phone. Make sure that you have the correct additions. Make sure you're doing your required readings. Using those course resources, you want it to put things into priority. You may have to rearrange some things, delete some things. Be thinking it through in the event that
That's what she was doing, yelling.
class. Go ahead, Miss Wilson.
Oh, sorry. I didn't have anything.
Oh, okay. So yeah, just make, I think you were, okay, yeah, you just came off. Sometimes I don't know what happens. You'll come off mute and, okay. It's like connectivity issues. Not sure what's going on here, but you just never know with that connectivity. Okay, let me close this PowerPoint up. And let's go to our little Canvas shell here. And then students, you always have that question about the grades when we take that exam. So we know that there are several sections and we can't give out the grades. until, and first of all, the last class has to take the exam. And then we do an exam analysis, which you want that to take place because sometimes things are not so correct on the exam. It could be, I don't know, a typo, any kind of thing, but you want that exam analysis to take place. And then once that happens, grades are pushed out. But we do announcement section. We do an announcement saying that they have been pushed, but we don't give thumbs up, smiley faces, frowns, thumbs down, any of that. You just have to wait until that last class takes their exam, and then that exam analysis takes place. I'm trying to pull up our syllabus here. I know you all are super excited. For the most part, this is the last term for you all. So you all are right there at the end. Okay, at the syllabus.
Yes, I am very excited.
Good, good. It's something to be excited about. Moving on to that next chapter or book. But it's a lifelong process, though. As healthcare providers, is what we're signing up for. So we never stop learning. Okay, so here's our syllabus. Of course, you can find it in the course shell. It goes over the learning outcomes. And then we have our student learning outcomes here as well. We're always analyzing things, identifying. And then we have to interpret. So these are the books here. When you click your Canvas, you want to make sure that all of your additions are correct. Because if they're not, we need to send a message to, I have to find out who. I don't know if it's help desk or the campus dean, so that it doesn't happen often, like I said, but sometimes just make sure your additions are correct. So take your syllabus and just check it against what's listed there in your resource list. We've already went over this part about the unit exams. You have 3 of them. The HESI's to 20%, the quizzes, lesson activities, and that one project. All those are 5%, and then the professionalism is 5% as well. Quizzes are out of class. We don't proctor them. They're 50 questions, but you sit that one time. So make sure that you have the time to complete those 50 questions. Okay. And these are the major concepts that we talked about. Well, we will talk about that core care coordination. We're that, so many people on that healthcare team, but we're that person kind of in the middle, that nurse, like, oh, so it's important that we don't, that our patients get all the resources that they have available for them. For example, we have to do dressing changes, but also they have to go out for an appointment. Also, they have physical therapy. Coordinating that care so that they get all of those resources and all of those interventions done is very important. Clinical judgment, using that critical thinking, and that nursing process, collaborating with the team, communication, we'll talk about that. Ethics, evidence, healthcare law, healthcare economics. How is this healthcare paid for? We go to the doctor, how is it paid for? Healthcare quality, healthcare policies, and then leadership, that chain of command. Okay, so you can look at your course outline on the syllabus, or you can go through the module, and it just lists, this just breaks it down, and it shows what's expected. So this right here kind of helps you formulate and get things structured so you can see how you need to move forward. So in week 1, we're going to talk about how nursing has evolved. We talk about critical thinking in the nursing process. So, and when we take our exams too, we come back for class because the class is so long. We, unlike other classes, you only have that 75 minutes to take the exam, but for this class, you come back after. So we are able to get all the content covered. Okay, week 2, we look back at the ethics, healthcare law. And you have that first adaptive quiz and that first lesson activity. Then week 3, we're supposed to have that unit exam, but because that holiday falls on a Monday, it will take place in week 4. It will take place in week 4. And then once we finish our exam, we come on back for class and we, cover our content. Then you have that quiz also. Usually, if you have an exam, you don't have a quiz, and vice versa. Then week 4, you have that exam, and then that quiz will be due also. You know, last time what we had, if you had a Thursday class, we had to do the same thing. Okay, and then we have our next exam, which will be in week 6. So we have an exam in week 4. We meet for class after, then we meet that week 5, and then that week 6, we take our exam 2. We finish all of our content. Let me look here and see. I don't want to say, I think it's week 9. We finish all of our content. Then week 7, we're looking at the healthcare settings and then those financing issues. Or how is it paid for? What is the structure of healthcare? And then week 8, you take that last quiz. And then we take our last exam in week 9. Week 10 is when you all do your presentations for that from your group project. So we finish all of our content in week 8. Because you take your exam in your last exam in week 9. Then week 10, you take you present your projects, and then week 11, you take your history. So it moves pretty fast to me. All the classes after week 1 is like, oh, where did time go? So that's the syllabus. So you can print that out. But just make sure that you are at least looking at it so you can get things aligned, get your calendar. It's not as electronic. Sometimes you need an electronic calendar and a paper calendar. Let's see here. So the syllabus cover sheet is in your course section as well. And it says the same thing as about the instructor tab. But there's just another quick reference in it that let's see, it's not up there. There we go. So we put this math resource in. Professor Burgart did a real good presentation. These students say that it was really good. So it's something that we share from term to term. And then some campuses, I don't know which ones, have that person on campus, that math tutor. I'm not sure which ones. We'll just see which resources that you have, on your campus. But the syllabus cover sheet has the same information as that about your instructor tab. It has as well, which is just the office hours and then our Zoom information. Of course, we start today. The withdrawal date is 2/27. The last date is March 29th. That's week 12. And then for week 12, too, it looks different than the rest of the weeks because we have to just meet for attendance. So, of course, you always have that option, but I encourage students to log in on week 12 because if you don't, you get marked absent. And we usually don't stay in that long anyways because we just look at, the data from the HISI. We talked about this already too. Academic integrity, just make sure that you are, not plagiarizing, even plagiarizing yourself, because if you have completed a similar project about the same concepts, make sure that you're going in and paraphrasing because it's going to pick it up as plagiarizing. So testing policy and testing on campus. Let's look at this. We have to have that 72-hour notice. Send an email, include myself, your campus dean, and Dean Brown in it. And then we'll send it you can add Dr. Tenza as well because she's the course lead. Remember that exam must be completed within that 7 days. So the module view gives you that same information that's on your syllabus. It's just in a different view. It's a different order. And it's listed by weeks. This is that tab that I was telling you about, a quick reference. It's the same information that's on that syllabus course sheet. And I also sent you the Zoom information to your email, to your Canvas mail. Sometimes you can't put your hand on it real fast, so I just put it in several places. So this gives you a different view, but it's the same information that's listed on that syllabus. These are your reading activities. What is our role? What is the RN's role? And it's important that you know your role, because sometimes, unfortunately, people will ask you to do things that are not in your scope of practice. And it's up to you to know what your scope of practice is and to say, no, hey, can't do that. Because, like I said, it's unfortunate people will ask you to do things that they know that they're not supposed to. So even be careful with that doing clinical, because you're there with that instructor. And remember, you don't have license just yet. So they shouldn't be asking you to, the other staff that's there, but sometimes they will ask students to do stuff. Okay, and so we're gonna actually put you in your groups tonight, so you can start just introducing yourselves and just discuss how it's gonna be best for you all to communicate. We'll give you time for that at the end as well, and then we'll give you your topic too. Okay, then week 2, we continue with more concepts, ethics, law, and then you will have your first quiz, your first adaptive quiz, and there are 5 of them. Okay. So week 3 is supposed to be the unit exam, but we don't meet that week. So we log in for week 4, take that unit exam, and then we review our content. But remember, you still have, your reading activities. And then you do have that quiz. It's going to be that second quiz about effective communication and being assertive. Not aggressive, but assertive. After today, it goes by really fast. And I know why she keeps saying it, but it really does, especially for those of you that have more than one class and have other responsibilities. So I can't stress it enough they have everything just lined out, and it's good as that way, because it's like you don't have to wonder about, okay, what am I supposed to be looking at? What am I supposed to be doing? So it's aligned so that it helps to keep you from not procrastinating and to keep you structured and everything. Okay. Look at nursing research, the evidence base. We don't just haphazardly be doing things. Our interventions come from evidence base with the latest information. Then week 10, you all present your projects, because we would have finished our information up here in week 9. So you present your projects, and so you all do really well on that. And then week 11 is HESI. And then week 12 is you log in. We're only there for a short amount of time. All right, let me check the chat, and then we're going to move on and start discussing things. We're going to discuss some of our concepts, and then we will go ahead and we'll put you in groups so you can all introduce yourselves and start gathering information about how to communicate, what's going to be the group's rules, how are we going to, in the event that we're running late or things need to be changed. Students have used all different types of ways of communicating. Email is the easiest. Text message, you all have all these different apps and things. We're not violating HIPAA because we don't have any patient information in there, so we don't have to worry about that part. So, but you all can use the WhatsApp, all those different things, to just so that if your role is bring it back to the group and reviewing whatever the concept is, and you don't have it ready yet, it's a quick way to communicate, and so the group is not feeling shorthanded because you didn't tell them that you had something going on, and so forth and so forth. So I think by now, Dean Brown and the campus dean have already arranged courses. Is there anyone here that know that they are not going to be in this course for the rest of the term because you're having to change sections or something? I think we were trying to be proactive with that. We kind of looked at the clinical schedules.
We have clinicals coming up on Mondays, but they haven't sent out no information saying what we was going to do about that.
Okay. Now I need you to put your first and last name on the screen. So what you do is you go to those are 3 little dots. And
I'm
then,
sorry.
no problem. Because we don't want the attendance administrator saying, hey, he or she wasn't there. So yeah, if you're logging in on different devices, I know it does that for some,
Yeah, I just
especially
switched to my computer.
exactly. That's what I was gonna say. If you log in on a different device, it remembers whatever it remembers. So just make sure. And I keep saying that. It's like, why should I keep saying? Because it'll happen. You'll be on a different device and it'll log you in as whatever the device's name. So you might, Miss Prey, might
There's
be
a few of us from Norfolk that's up here that's gonna have that issue.
okay. Yeah, and that's where that clinical is overlapping.
Yeah,
And they can, what time does that clinical end? Do you know?
it's 12 hours, about 7.
Okay, so then into 7. Because I know we've had classes
Six,
sometime in the
7.
past. Go ahead. You said
It's
7
probably
p.m.
about 6, 7. It's a makeup clinical, so if anything, they probably just try to switch today because
Okay.
I don't think they can change this online class.
Yes, they've come up with different. That's what I was asking. Was it going to be, what was the circumstance? Because we've done different things in the past. Well, sometimes one class ended at 4:30, the other class began at 4:30, and we were able to come up with something. But with it being that many hours, like you're saying, they more than likely might switch today. I don't know. So, what we'll do is we'll do a soft group this week just to let you all introduce yourselves, and then we'll know for sure by the end of the week. So when we come back next time, we'll know for sure who will, be in the groups with each other. Because if it's just
Okay,
that one makeup clinical, it, like I said,
there's a
it might.
few.
Oh, it's several clinical dates.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
As
okay.
I said, they probably change, but I'm just letting you know now, just so you can be aware. I know they probably will change it, but I just want to let you know.
Yes, they kind of mentioned it, but I thought it had already been worked out. But you're saying it
They hadn't said that to us yet. That's why I wanted to let you know.
okay. Thank you for letting me know that. Yes. So we'll see. Okay, so let's get some of our concepts talked about here. Let's go. So you all were given the PowerPoints. Let me go back here. So yes, the Board of Nursing, it requires seat time. So that's how they come. It's like, why they come up with us getting our class at 8:27? The Board of Nursing, it saves so much seat time, it saves so much clinical time, and then clinical time can be divided in SIMs, and it depends on what your Board of Nursing says. So we have to, in order for you to, meet the requirements based on the Board of Nursing. That's why, you got to do those makeups and all of that stuff, because otherwise you're not meeting the requirement of the Board of Nursing. And so we do want to make, get things changed around so that we can at least allow you to meet the requirements that are out there. So in week one's announcement, it's the same information, you all. We just put it together because sometimes if you look at stuff in a different view, it's like, okay, you can grasp what's expected. So that welcome to week one, it's the same information. It's on your syllabus, it's in your module, but it's just put together in a different view for you. And so we did add the PowerPoints there. Let me get them pulled up. So if you, and I didn't mention this, if that slide was usually in there, if you are a SAP or reentry, weekly meetings are required. So just make sure you just send me an email, and that can take the place of, we can do an email exchange, phone call, or Zoom. Okay, so let's look at the evolution of nursing here. And we are still evolving. Because I don't know if y'all remember or have heard about, and some of you all may personally know about, prior to the pandemic, there wasn't and I may be saying it incorrectly because it might be termed differently in different states. There wasn't that, is it medication assistant, something like that? I forget the exact name of it. But prior to the pandemic, there wasn't such a thing. It wasn't a title that was the medication assistant. Am I saying that correct, y'all? But what happened was, I don't know if you all recall, if the students had made it up into certain courses in their school, nursing school, then they were able to perform many of the functions as a practical nurse. Of course, with oversight, things like that wasn't injections, but PRN medications and things like that. They had close oversight, but students were able to get that medication card and complete tasks pretty similar to practical nursing. So, we pretty much took lemons and make lemonade out of it. We use it as an opportunity to, add another career out there that people could have as a career choice. So after licensing, the LPN is permitted to perform the job role of the LPN as aligned as respected to their state regulations. And we'll talk about the scope of nursing. Each state has their own scope of nursing. That scope of practice is the things that we can lawfully do. As you all have been going to your different clinical sites, and as you've been doing your clinical simulations, hopefully you have kind of like put a pin in things that you like, things that you didn't like, or this said, oh, I could be this, I could work in peas, or I could, I don't want to work in peas or whatever. So, because your scope of practice says, hey, you can lawfully do these things, but then personally, you may or may not want to work in that setting. So hopefully you've been kind of looking at different tasks that has been required of nurses in the different settings that you have been in. And we know Nightingale established a school of nursing in England back in 1860. So you all get your Nightingale lamps and everything at your, most places call them their pinning ceremonies. Nightingale's core belief was perfection of mankind. Nursing was a sacred calling, a commitment to work for mankind. It wasn't a business. She was against licensure, likened to a union, pushed for nursing to be a respectful vocation. So those early training schools, they started in Germany. The hospital known as the Pittsburgh Infirmary still exists in Pennsylvania. As nursing shortages continue, hospital-based schools of nursing emerged as a cost-effective labor force for the hospitals. So we're seeing, excuse me, that these programs are being reestablished as well, these hospital-based schools of nursing. And what they're doing is they're collaborating and partnering with an institution. For example, the local hospital in your area will collaborate or partner with Fortis. So students would be they can go to Fortis or they can go to the hospital-based school. So we're seeing those reemerge, especially with the shortage. And so we're trying to, have more healthcare professionals available to provide, that best care for the clients, the patients. So by 1903, states began to take steps that led to monitoring practical nursing. Organizations were developed, such as the National League of Nursing. Mississippi was the first to pass a law licensing practical nurses. Licensing was not mandatory, but in 1938, New York was the only state requiring mandatory licensure. Today, all states require mandatory licensure for nurses, including practical nurses. And so once you sit for your NCLEX, you'll get the opportunity to decide, well, hey, if you want multi-state license or if you want to just practice in that one state. But nevertheless, your scope of practice tells you those things that you can lawfully do in whatever state that you're in. Now, if you are not licensed in a state, you cannot go to that state and practice. So just be thinking about that too, if you want to do that multi-state or have license in more than one state. So out of all the things that we do as LPNs that's in our scope of practice, they've narrowed it down to these 4 words that say, hey, for the most part, we can describe the LPN scope of practice. They judge, they determine whether or not things are critical, not critical. We recognize this is a difference in this patient. This patient usually talks and they're oriented ×4. But we went in, they were hard to arouse, and we determined, hey, we need to, call the code. We need to inform the doctor, inform the healthcare provider, inform the RN. So they've narrowed it down to those 4 terms. So there are all different types of programs out there. Was partly created due to the shortage. We have associates, we have everything from A to Z pretty much. Hybrid, part-time. You can be sitting in the classroom, brick and mortar, and you can be online. You can have a mix. there are all different type of programs out there to help offset the shortage, but we still have that shortage. Okay. So the first computerized this was just in 1994, you all. That wasn't that long ago. Before then, we're all having to go in and paper and pencil. So the first computerized text in NCLEX was in 1994. Like I said, it hadn't been that long ago. Okay. That's just a little bit about the history. So let's go on to our next set of slides. Let's look at critical thinking. Pull out my little notes to make sure we've covered everything. Okay. Okay, so the overview of critical thinking. Let's look at these right here. All right, 10 things. Okay, number 10, things are not what they used to be or what they will be in this changing healthcare system. So, we are having to help people navigate, how will they pay for insurance, selecting new plans. We do want to take in consideration if they already have chronic diseases, because they want to select a plan that's going to allow them to get those exams and all the tests that helps them so that their disease process can be managed. And that was one thing about that affordable care. You went into the marketplace and you selected what plan was best for you, because not all plans allow you to have all the MRIs that a person would need in order for that healthcare provider to keep a check on whatever disease process that requires MRIs to be done or whatever blood work. LPNs frequently care for clients as a member of the healthcare team who are not yet stabilized and have multiple problems. And so what we have to think about, what's priority. We're going to take care of all the issues and concerns our patient has. But when we're having to select priority, we need to be thinking about what are those 3 letters first when we're trying to determine priority, you all. We want to think about ABCs, airway, breathing, and circulation. And then, of course, we go to Maslow's hierarchy of needs to determine what things we should give attention to first and next, and so on and so on. But we are going to, take care of all of our issues that our client has. More clients and their families, they're being involved in healthcare decisions, but we do want to make sure that we are not giving out any information to anyone that should not have the information. Just because it is that person, that patient's family that's there, we still want to keep things confidential that are supposed to be confidential. Confidentiality is a core ethical principle. So sharing a patient's information without consent is a violation. We want to protect the patient's privacy. And sometimes we be like, oh, well, this is this person's family member, and it's okay. No, you want to make sure that you have permission to share that patient's information. We want to make sure that we're complying with legal and ethical standards. We're respecting that patient's autonomy and their dignity. And the nurse, the healthcare professionals, we are expected to keep things confidential. We're expected to keep private information private. I don't know if you all have seen when you were at clinical, when they were like a medication card or a container that the medication was used up, how they blotted out the patient's information. We want to make sure that we are keeping that information private. But we do want the clients involved in their care because it's their care, right? And so we want them to have all the information, as much information as they need so they can make an informed decision. And we support them in their autonomy. If they refuse to have a test or procedure done, we support them in that, but we just make sure that they have all the information they need to make an informed decision. Are there any alternatives? In are there any alternative treatment options? We want to just make sure that we address all of that. LPNs must be able to move from one healthcare setting to another. We do have, like I said, if you've seen the different settings already with going through your clinical. Rapid changing information explosion requires LPNs to develop new learning and workplace skills. Clients and families and insurance companies demand to see evidence of benefits, efficiency, and the results of caregiving. As a matter of fact, one of the tasks of one of the LPNs could be they do have a nurse that goes around and asks sometimes they give these surveys for the clients and their patients to complete on their own. But a lot of times they have it where it's a nurse's responsibility in addition to other tasks. So they go around and they do these surveys face to face. Hey, when your nurse came in, did they knock on the door? That they have their name tag on it? You see them wash their hands or use any, perform any hand hygiene. Today's progress often creates new problems that cannot be solved by old ways of thinking. We encourage that spirit of inquiry. Is there a better way that we can provide the best care to this client? We're using less resources, but using less time. That spirit of inquiry. You all, as these nurses, we see it a lot of times with new nurses because you all have that last 5 years of information when you're doing your research projects and all of that information. And so you all are usually the ones that, hey, I think we can do this differently. We can save 5 minutes, and 5 minutes is a lot because remember, you're not just taking care of one patient. You have a team of patients to take care of. So learning how to improve your thinking skills does not have to be difficult. So early on, I mentioned if you cannot attend the live exam reviews, commit to at least going back, looking at the content, reviewing these classroom recordings. All of that helps with it helps lays that strong foundation. So when you're faced with a scenario or a concept, you identify what the concept or the concepts are in the scenario, and then you're able to quickly identify what's the next steps. Your ability to focus your thinking on how to get the results you need can make a difference between whether or not you succeed or fail in the fast-paced healthcare system. Because remember, like I said, maybe in clinical, you probably had maybe one, maybe two clients that you had to take care of. You were the team lead sometimes. But remember, once you get your license, you're going to have that team of clients, of patients in the hot acute care setting. You may have 4 or 5 patients, depends on what the nurse patient ratio is, but it's rare that you have that one patient. So it's going to be really important that you have that sturdy foundation of understanding of all the different concepts. So critical thinking is related to the nursing process. We can't get away from that nursing process. It really does helps us think everything through. It helps us with our judgment. And like I mentioned earlier, we are just lifelong learners. The LPN is expected to be an active learner and a critical thinker. So, remembering what the concepts are, even if you have to go all the way back to what that body system is. What was that body system supposed to do? What organs are in that body system? What are those organs supposed to do? And then you can compare it with, okay, well, the respiratory system, allows for gas exchange. Inhale, you exhale carbon dioxide, inhale oxygen. So normal respiratory rate was, for adults. So when you go in and you assess someone and their respirations are 30, well, you can quickly reference, well, hey, if they're above that normal range, what is going on with that gas exchange? So then with that's happening, what more than likely will we see in that client if we are assessing them? So you can think of it like that, but it helps you to think critically and pretty quickly also. Okay. We're going to pause here. We're going to take our next 5-minute break. We'll see you in 5. As a reminder, this recording still plays, but you can go off camera, put your mics on mute. All right, we've got about 30 seconds to come on back in. And so we will save our other 15 minutes toward the end. So we will meet and we'll stop and let you all get into groups here. So we got a few more minutes to review content before we stop and do that part. I went back to Campus View just to make sure I was telling you all correct. But yes, it says 5:30 to 8:27. So we're going to leave our other 15 minutes toward the end. So that means our class will get out at 8:12. But then before then, about 8 o'clock, we'll stop and do let you all get into groups and just, introduce yourselves for a few minutes. And then we'll wrap it up. All right, here. Let's go here. I thought I was looking at that time because I'm in different time zones. So make sure don't run over. So what is autonomy?
Well, a patient have the right to choose their own decisions and the treatment that they want.
Okay. Someone else. What is autonomy?
Respecting the patient rights and what they want in their care.
Okay. Good. Thank you all for sharing. Autonomy, respecting the patient's rights to make informed decisions about the care that they want or they don't want, even if it conflicts with the healthcare provider and the recommendations that the doctor is making. We don't want to hide information if a patient, is, leaning toward not accepting an intervention. We don't want to hide anything. We don't want to ignore patients' cultural concerns or beliefs. We shouldn't be encouraging the patient to make one decision over another. And the patients, they don't mean any harm. They always ask because you're that trusted individual. You're there providing care for them. So they'll always ask, well, what do you think, nurse? And so remember, we don't give our advice, or we just make sure that they have enough information so that they can make an informed decision. Remember, it's okay, even if what the healthcare provider recommends is opposite of what the patient wants. We don't want to hide information from them. We don't want to ignore the patient's cultural beliefs or their concerns, and we don't want to encourage them to make one decision or the other. They just, we just make sure they have enough information. And that leads us to cultural competence as well. Cultural competence is an active learning process because each patient, is different because we provide that individualized care. So we need to understand and be respectful of diverse values because we do want to provide that individualized care that's effective and that's unique. We don't want to make assumptions about any one patient, about what they look like, about their height or what their pay status or any of that. Pull this PowerPoint back up. Looking for my little PowerPoint. It's over here. Okay, here it is. Okay, so this talks about different thinking, our thought process. All of non-thinking. The mind is made up and no additional facts will be considered. Black and white thinking with no grays in between. Negative thinking. The mind is stuck on a negative thoughts and blocks worthwhile. And so we do want, like I said, just make sure that client has enough information, alternative treatments, alternative options, even if it does go against what is recommended. We just want to make sure, we don't want to have a negative thoughts about our patient because they don't want to move forward, whatever the intervention is that we're there to provide. Critical thinking is an advanced way of thinking and problem-solving method. It's used to resolve problems and to find ways to improve a situation, even when no problem, no real, true, direct, clear problem exists. But it helps us to improve the situation. It involves collecting and analyzing data. It answers questions such as, how can we do this better? And how can we assist the client in achieving the highest quality outcome? What resources are essential and which can be eliminated to save costs? Because each client is going to be different. One client might already have a cane walker or crutch or a hospital bed available for them. So that resource or that equipment might not have to be purchased by that client because they already have it, or they can get it or borrow it or use it, or it may be made available through some type of program. So we have to just think all that through. So therefore, that client wouldn't have to spend money on that resource that they might need. Critical thinking involves questioning with meaning. You know, that example that I gave with the client, we went in and assessed the vital signs and the respiratory rate was 30. When we go back to say, well, wait a minute, this is the respiratory system. Respiration should be between this, and if it's more than this or less than this, that gas exchange, the proper gas exchange is not taking place. So what could potentially happen to this client? What's our next steps? Collaboration is going to be key in effective thinking. Using that nursing process, assessing, gathering information, planning for that client, implementing those things that we're going to do. And then also evaluating, hey, did this work? Is this issue resolved? Was the goal met? Factors that influence critical thinking, upbringing and culture, motivation, and attitude. So we do want to provide that individualized care. So additional factors that influence critical thinking. A person's ability to problem solve. Using that nursing process will help you. It will help you sort through things, gather things in an appropriate way so that there's no gaps in information that's being collected. And we'll talk about communication skills too here. So critical thinking and the NCLEX PN cognitive levels. So knowledge. Some questions are going to be knowledge. Where we're just recalling and repeating information. But that next gen is going to be that analysis and that application. So breaking down those complex parts and relate them to the bigger picture. The application, applying what is learned to the new situations. So all of our questions will not just be that knowledge, but in order to do the analysis part of the application part, we have to be able to recall what, some knowledge. What does the respiratory system do for us? What organs? What's the normal respiratory rate? So that knowledge helps us to be able to analyze and break down those complex parts. And another thing to think about too is in situations, the person has a chronic disease process, what is expected? If a person has hypertension, we want their blood pressure to be more toward that 120/80 or a little bit less. But if it's if they outright have hypertension, they're non-compliant, more than likely when we check that blood pressure, it's going to probably be above the range. So that's kind of expected because this client has hypertension and they're non-compliant. So the LPN is responsible for many of the judgments and decisions made in healthcare, because in long-term care facilities, you can be that team leader. You're the one that's delegating. We'll talk about that, I think, in the next couple of weeks about delegating. So let's look at critical thinking. So we have Jane Harris, age 58. Their weight is 92 kilograms. So we translate to pounds, you multiply that. Height is 102 centimeters. Their BMI is 35.1. And it's telling you right here that they're overweight because to calculate the BMI, you can do that calculation. So right here it's saying they're obese, so they're overweight. The chief complaint, patient says, I've been feeling very tired, thirsty, and go to the bathroom a lot. So let's get some history. The history says this patient has hypertension. They have a family history of diabetes. And then particularly on the mother's side, the patient does take lisinopril. Let's look at the vital signs. We got a temperature of 98.6. Not sure the route. The heart rate is 88. Blood pressure is 146/90. Respirations are 18. And the O2 saturation is 98% on room air. Okay. What do we think might be going on with this patient?
Pre-diabetic,
What's your why?
because most diabetics, they're thirsty a lot and they have frequently go to the restroom.
Okay. In addition to that, so you went back to the diabetes, the actual chronic disease process. You looked at the signs and symptoms, and then what else do we see that might?
The history from the mom, the
history
family.
of the mom. Got it. Yeah. And then what else? One more thing.
Hypertension.
Hypertension.
Blood pressure.
One more thing.
Obesity.
Obesity.
Oh, obesity.
Yep. So they're probably taking in too many calories, not meeting that. They might not be, but they could be more than likely taking in too many calories that they're not burning up. Good. So you look at all of those things. Okay. So, so this is more information on this client. We have a fasting glucose of 178. So what does fasting mean?
They haven't
They
eaten for a
haven't
while.
eaten anything.
Okay, so would this be within range, too low or too high?
Too high.
Too
High.
high.
Too high.
Okay. So what about this hemoglobin A1C? What is it a test known for people that have what?
That's
Diabetes.
diabetic. It's like a 3-month period where they measure.
It tells what that glucose has been looking back 3 months. And what is it saying about this patient's glucose?
It's high.
High.
They've been high. Exactly. And then so we're looking at this. What's the relation with this cholesterol here? Which diagnosis this patient has?
With the obesity, because his the cholesterol is high.
Okay. And what other diagnosis? Got total cholesterol of 210, the LDL is 130, the HDL is 38, and then the triglycerides are 220.
Could be because of the blood pressure too, right?
Exactly, because go ahead. Because we're supposed to have some cholesterol, right, in our bloodstream. But when we have too much of this stuff, then what's happening to that blood? Is it able to just go and flow like it's supposed to?
No, it's not circulating
Clotting.
properly.
Which leads to what? When we do that,
The artery to be clogged. The artery.
Exactly. So when we listen for that blood pressure, boom, boom, we're getting that high number. So doing that patient teaching and reinforcing that patient teaching and say, hey, this right here is showing, your blood's going to have a hard time moving around, and that bloodstream can't get to your brain and your baby pinky toe because we got too much of this cholesterol floating around in there. Okay, but then let's look at what's the serum creatinine. What does this stuff talk about? What does it tell us?
It deals with like your sodium levels and
Kidney
urine,
function.
kidney function. Got it. Good. So that's how you're relating. You're going back and forth. If you know the body system or if you know the organ, what it's supposed to do, you're making that relation. That's good. Okay. So using critical thinking, remember, what are the diagnostic criteria for diabetes mellitus? Understand based on her labs and symptoms, explain why Miss Harris is likely a diabetic. You all were dead on for that. You answered correctly. What initial management steps would you implement? So when test taking tip, when the scenario is asking you a question, look for those key terms. It says, what initial management steps would you implement for Miss Harris?
First thing,
Take her blood sugar.
help make sure she's adhering to her blood pressure medication, but also change her diet due to the her high triglycerides and cholesterol.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? I heard reinforcing the teaching about her diet, reinforcing taking the medications, and then just talking about the overall how to manage the disease process that she has. And also, I think someone said maybe watching the calories, because then if you don't already have diabetes, you can make those lifestyle modifications to prevent it. And that's having that nice balance between food, exercise, especially if this person is a type 2. You can probably make those lifestyle changes and prevent it. Okay, it says analyze, identify the possible complications of unmanaged diabetes. What could potentially happen?
She could potentially
Affected limbs,
They could lose their limbs.
Okay.
vision,
the foot neuropathy stuff.
All these different complications that can arise from unmanaged, keep having too much sugar. This is an instance where having more or too much of something is not good. Having all that extra sugar floating around in the bloodstream, having that blood pressure out of range, is not good. And then
I have a question.
Mhm.
So will we also monitor like her glucose levels too?
More than likely, yes. They probably will give her that monitor so she can do like a little a diary, and also a blood pressure cuff as well. Do that as well so she can see, what it's been running and then when. Because a lot of times we can tell people, but if they actually see those, like if we give them that chart of what's normal and they get that monitor, even that blood pressure monitor and that glucometer, and they see those numbers and they're like, what? My blood sugar is this, and it's supposed to be this, and it's more real to them, and they gain that understanding. Like, oh wow, yeah. So that's a good point. That diary, so they can monitor and see. Okay, and so I think we hit I think we were right on everything. Lisinopril is appropriate due to renal function. We talked about educating the blood glucose monitoring, addressing the abnormalities, the lifestyle changes. All right, they're pretty good. Okay, so it says, let's put critical thinking to use. We have a 54-year-old male client admitted this morning with low back pain. Watch our time. Past medical history of heart failure, treated with digoxin, Lasix or furosemide, and metoprolol or low pressure. Metoprolol. Vital signs within normal limits. No allergies at full code. EKG shows normal sinus rhythm. CBC and CMP were drawn. Critical lab value called to the nurse. Potassium was 3.2. All other lab values are within normal limits. The LPN calls a physician with a critical lab value. What orders does the LPN anticipate receiving and why?
Potassium.
Order for some replacing that potassium. And then what medication more than likely probably is the reason why they are kind of low on that potassium?
Furosemide.
Furosemide.
Exactly, because it's not a potassium sparing diuretic. It's one that just, have the person to excrete the potassium. So usually that person, with doctors knowing that, they usually will put them on, a supplement, or they'll do frequent potassium checks because it's not a potassium sparing. Yeah, pretty good. Okay, let's see. Got it. Oh, we did talk about the digoxin. So what's something, and I know you all probably have administered in clinical, what do we need to do before we administer digoxin?
Need to take the
heart rate.
That heart rate. Usually they want you to listen to that apical pulse for that full minute. And if it's below 60, usually we don't actually give it. Okay. All right. So let's stop here. I will put you in groups for just a few minutes. We only have about 6 minutes. We're just going to do introductions and just discuss your best ways to communicate what issues you found out, run into in the past with working with groups. And then probably more than likely by Wednesday, I'll go ahead and post the topics that you'll have. Remember, this assignment is not due until week 10, but we do want you to work because you have all these other things to do. So we do give you plenty of time to work on it. So by Wednesday, we should have the clinical thing all fixed and situated. So your task now is to spend the next 6 minutes identifying ways the best to communicate when you're working with a group project, because sometimes you run into all kind of delays or things happen. How would we best need to work it out? In the event that I have a task and I'm unable to complete it, or I feel like how should we discuss that as a group? What's going to be our group rules. I'm gonna mix you up here. Let me go here. Give me 1 minute. And so just accept the invitation to the breakout room. So if some of you all were in my Tuesdays class, and that Tuesday class now belonged to, and I don't think you posted anything in there. I don't think you had anything to post. So just make sure that, you know, your section, that you're in the correct section, which I'll check roll here after class. So we're going to give you 6 minutes to talk, and then we'll come back, and then we'll go on our last break, which should take us on out for the rest of tonight. So accept the invitation, and I'm going to circulate around just to hear the discussions, and the breakout room should be open. Just accept the invitation. Autonomy is respecting a patient's right to make informed decisions about their own care, even if it conflicts with the healthcare provider's recommendations. We don't want to hide info either if a patient has made a decision. We don't want to ignore a patient's cultural concerns or beliefs. We shouldn't encourage patients to make one decision over the other. We just want to support whatever it is that they have decided. We're going to talk about beneficence. It involves acting in ways that promote the well-being of a patient, including providing beneficial treatments and interventions. Cultural competence involves actively learning about and gaining understanding and respecting diverse values to provide individualized, effective care and uniqueness. We don't want to make assumptions. We do not want to make assumptions. So cultural competence involves actively learning about your client, establishing those therapeutic relationships early on. So non-malfeasance is to do no harm, avoid actions that could cause harm to the patient. We want to avoid harm to the patient. Justice ensures fairness in the healthcare delivery, including equal access to care and equitable distribution of resources. It doesn't matter about that patient's pay status, how many times they're coming back and forth to that clinic. We want to provide equal access to care. Moral distress occurs when a nurse knows the ethically correct action Moral distress occurs when a nurse knows the ethically correct action, but feels powerless to act due to institutional or legal constraints. Professionally, we can lawfully provide an intervention. Professional ethics and personal ethics might not agree sometimes. We want to discuss with our concerns with the manager. There might be an alternative responsibilities that respect both professional and personal patient care needs. Criminal offense, stealing medications or narcotics. That's an example of criminal offense. Is a person that a nurse is stealing the patient's medications, whether it's narcotics or whatever it is. Criminal negligence, failure to follow standards of care causing harm. HIPAA violation, sharing protected health information. Without consent, we got to have permission, even if it's family members, you all. We're expected to maintain that patient's confidentiality. It is crucial to maintain confidentiality, protecting that patient's privacy. So we have a scope of practice, which comes from our nurse practice act. These are activities and tasks that a nurse that we are legally permitted to perform. The legal scope of nursing practice that protects the public. Can a nurse practice without a license? No, this violates the nurse practice that a nurse must have a license for each state that they are going to practice in. Is it okay for an RN to ask the LPN to perform a intervention that is outside of the scope of practice? No, it is not okay. Many times, unfortunately, people will ask you to do things that are not in your scope of practice. So it's up to you to know and to speak up and speak out. Informed consent means the patient voluntarily agrees to the treatment that's after an explanation. Okay, so let's look at the RN and the LPN. The RN completes submission assessments. Then the RN completes an in-depth head-to-toe assessment. While the LPN, we can administer medications, we can perform catheter care, and we can, also assess the client. But the RN does a more in-depth assessment. Unlicensed personnel, they can get vital signs for us. They can get that blood pressure, but they cannot interpret what the numbers are saying. They cannot say, well, this is out of range, this is within range. They cannot interpret. It is never okay for anyone, a doctor, a nurse, to ask an LPN to perform a task that is outside of their scope of practice. Okay. We have an obligation to report. Nurses are mandated reporters. Nurses are obligated to report suspicion, not confirmation. We don't have to have all the details. If child abuse is suspected, then we are mandated reporters. We have to report the suspicion, not the confirmation. And that information is usually reported to Child Protective Services. So suspected elder abuse or neglect includes poor care, pressure ulcers, unexplained bruises, fearful demeanor, domestic violence. We must document the disclosure and refer to the appropriate resources. Impaired healthcare workers must be reported to protect the patient's safety. We want to ensure that the patient is safe and receives appropriate care. We do want to notify our supervisor or charge nurse or nurse manager. We do want to document observations and objectives in the patient chart. We want to make sure that we're documenting factual information objectively. We want to file a report according to the facilities policies and the state law. Continue to monitor the patient and follow up on the situation. This is when we're talking about abuse. We want to remember medication, the rights of administration, the rights of medication administration. We just want to take the time to make sure that those medications are being administered appropriately. We want to make sure we have the correct patient, the correct medication, the correct dose. Remember, the client has the right to refuse. If an error is committed, we do need to document the error thoroughly and report it according to the facility's policies. Okay. So let's talk about civil law. We have malpractice, tort, negligence, and defamation. Okay. Civil law, malpractice, a legal wrong involving harm caused by a nurse's failure to follow standards of care. A tort, a civil wrongdoing that causes harm leading to legal liability. Negligence, failure to act as a reasonably prudent nurse would, resulting in injury. And then defamation, making false statements that damages a person's reputation. Okay. We do have some events that are called sentinel events. They are unexpected events that result in or has the potential to result in serious patient harm or death, or serious physical, psychological injury, triggers immediate institutional investigation, and there's usually some type of permanent or temporary harm caused to that patient.
Ooh, right. Okay, so I guess when we do our research and stuff as a group, then we'll just oh, hey, Dr. Martin Ford. Question. So is this like an actual like real poster, like an actual poster? Just pretend like this a poster. Or is it like I don't know how to make no poster on the computer.
It's up to you all. Just think about a poster is a space.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is a square, is a rectangle, whether or not it's paper or actual physical poster, or is a PowerPoint, or is a flyer. So it's just a space that you put all these things, all the information. So it could be a real poster that you go, but you'll just need to take pictures of it to upload it. But some students have actually used that flyer format. They have used the PowerPoint format. It's just a space. We say poster, but it's a space for your information. So wherever you want to put your information at, you be creative with that. I know like some students have done a flyer, and they had different parts of the flyer where each student put their part in the flyer, but it was one flyer. So it was like their poster, but it was on a Word document, so to speak.
Okay.
Yeah. So whatever space you use, if you do use a real poster board, just make sure that you can take the pictures and upload it.
Okay.
And we're going to close the rooms out. I'm going to bring y'all back in about 1 minute.
Okay, then.
Okay, everybody's coming back. Everyone should be back in about 26 seconds. We should have everyone back in about, let's see, how much more time? They should be all closed. We have everyone back now. 1 or 2 more are coming back. So that poster, you know, if you want to just think of it as your information on a space, whether or not that's an actual poster board. Now, if you actually get the actual poster board, you know, the thing that you go out and buy, you know, you'll have to upload your pictures. Some students have used a Word document. They've used a flyer format. They've used PowerPoint. But nevertheless, it's just a place to put your information. Students have used a flyer, and they had different parts of the flyer. And it'll start to shape once I actually send you the actual instructions about the information that's going to be on this poster board, so to speak. But nevertheless, it is a space where you have all of your information. And everybody works on their part. You all decide on, you divvy out the parts and you put it all together. Everyone's going to turn in the same assignment. So even though there may be 4 people in the group or 3 people in the group, all 3 persons, each person has a part to play in it. You put it all together, everybody's turns in the same thing. And so just because I turned it in doesn't mean the other 2 in the group shouldn't turn it. Everyone has to turn the same assignment. And for some reason, we get kind of mixed up on that part. We just let one person turn it in. No, everyone has to turn in the same thing, even though, you know, it's one part. We know you work together in a group. So we're going to take our last 15 minutes that we do have now. So we don't get out early, but we haven't taken our last 15-minute break. So this would be the end. Now, I do ask you, now the first part of class, and one of the orientation part, you can always refer back to that, but fast forward to the part where we're reviewing content. As a matter of fact, while you all were in the breakout rooms, I was reviewing content also. So make sure that you at least fast forward to the part and start looking at that content, because we have next week. So, we're off that third week, just to make sure that you understand the concepts, and you can ask questions about what you have questions about. So we're going on our break, but you don't return because, class will be over with. Have a good rest of the week, and we'll see you next week.
I have a question.
Now when you say like everybody like divvy out parts, like what exactly are the parts to?
I'm going to send them to you by Wednesday. Like I said, it's going to shape up when I send. Yeah, trying to give Dean Brown them time to get you all where you're going to be, so we won't have so much confusion. Because if you divvy out the parts before they kind of finalize things, it's going to kind of create a little friction. Like, oh, well, this person's not here anymore. So it's going to form up or shape up a little bit more by Wednesday. So say so I'll give you an example. A project is about the parts of the respiratory system and their functions and the organs. So Ms. Johnson has the functions, I will have the organs, and then Graham will have what was the other thing I said? The normal processes. So we each work on that part. We meet weekly. Hey, this is what I found out. How do you think I should present it on my part of the poster? And we say Ms. Johnson's going to put all that together. So we have to submit everything to Ms. Johnson by January the 5th at 8 o'clock. So we send all of it to your email or however we decide to put it, and we put it all together. So that's how it's going to be.
I have a question. You said we're going to break, correct?
Yes, but then that should take you to the end of class, so you don't log back in.
I mean, I can go ahead and log out then, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Because it's a late class, most students like to use that last to the end, and therefore you kind of get out a little bit earlier. But you're really not getting out early because it's your time anyway. It's your break time that we didn't take already. So have a good night.
Thank you.
Give it to Wednesday.
Good night.
Have a good night. Any other questions? I'm here. But otherwise, go on your break and we'll see you next week. Okay. As I mentioned, professionally, we can lawfully provide an intervention. Sometimes our professional ethics and personal ethics might not agree. We do want to discuss these concerns with our manager. There might be alternative responsibilities that respects both professional and personal and patient care needs. We talked about criminal law, criminal offense, taking things that do not belong to us. We want to make sure, even borrowing patients' medications, we need to let pharmacy know that that patient needs their own medication because it is a criminal offense. Failing to follow standards of care. We do not want to violate HIPAA. We want to keep private information private and only share that protected health information with those that we have permission to share it with. We only want to complete tasks that are in our scope of practice, and our Nurse Practice Act tells us those things that we can legally, that we are permitted to do. If a doctor asks us to complete a task that is not in our scope of practice, we should not complete that task. We should know what's in our scope of practice, and we speak up and say no, because it's your license is on the line. As I mentioned earlier, we talked about malpractice, a tort, and negligence and defamation. Defamation is making false statements that damages a person's reputation. Negligence, failure to act as a reasonably prudent nurse. Failure to act as a reasonably prudent nurse would, resulting in patient injury. A tort is a civil wrongdoing that causes harm, leading to a legal liability. Malpractice, a legal wrong involving a harm to a being caused by harm caused by a nurse failure to perform the standards of care. We have an obligation to report. Like I said, we are mandated reporters. We have to report the suspicion. We don't have to report the confirmation. We don't have to do the investigation and all of that information. We don't have to do that. But if we suspect that there is child abuse or elder abuse, we must report it. For elder abuse, we do not look for signs and symptoms such as pressure ulcers, unexplained bruises, feel for demeanor. We do want to disclose it to the appropriate authorities. If we're working with someone that is impaired, we must report it to protect that patient. We must report it. Sentinel events, an unexpected event that results in or has potential to result in serious patient harm or death. Okay, so root cause analysis is system failures must be identified to prevent reoccurrence. So their facilities have what they call incident reports. And so what happens with that is they gather the information about what actually happened because they try to identify if something within their system, if a policy needs to be revised, if something needs to be done differently, because they do want to prevent the reoccurrence. And that root cause analysis is you look at the information and try to identify in hopes of preventing a reoccurrence. Whistleblowing, a professional obligation, anything that puts the patient's safety at risk, reporting through the proper chain of command, protects both the patient and the nurse. That whistleblowing, you probably have heard about that. Okay, we talked about autonomy. We do want to respect that patient's right to make informed decisions, even if it conflicts with the healthcare provider. Recommendations. So we kind of talked about critical thinking. And critical thinking involves purposeful, positive outcome, like what is expected. This helps us to measure. Evidence-based decision-making considers the circumstances. The nursing process is involved. What are we assessing? What information are we collecting? We want to verify that information. What are those clients' needs? Can we use problem solving to safely meet the patient's needs? We do not want to assume. We want to gather the information, the facts, the truth about what is available. So critical thinking includes observing, analyzing, and planning. With this being done, we can provide optimal patient care. It is evidence-based. We want to apply knowledge, just recalling normal values, for example, for the blood pressure or the glucose. We want to compare the normal values with what the patient's values are. What are the problem-solving strategies? You want to discuss them with the team. What does this patient need? Individualized, tailored to what the patient needs. Adjust the care plan accordingly. We want to be safe. A lot of times they have these algorithms. It assists with assuring that standard-based approaches are actually followed. Okay. So the RN develops nursing care plans using the nursing process. The RN can administer medications. The RN does an in-depth, comprehensive assessment of all the body systems, and they can delegate tasks based on the staff competencies. And then the LPN can administer medications, collecting patient data and assessment. That's that subjective and objective information as well. It's just not as in-depth as the RNs. The nursing process includes collecting that data, assessment, planning, providing that input, and help identifying basic care needs, implementation, carrying out interventions, and then evaluation, report findings. Has there been any progress? Has there been no change? Has this client gotten worse? Has the goal been met? So that evaluation helps us to look back at things and see if what the interventions that we're implementing, are they doing any good? Are they helping this client? With clinical judgment, remember each situation is unique and different because we do want to provide that individualized care. So even though we have 5 clients that have diabetes, we still want to look at each situation as different. Each patient is different. We want to consider all the components for the issue. We want to think about, is there a mental status change? Is there behavior change? We want to look for cues or any patterns that indicate that there has been a change in the client. Has it been an increase in blood pressure, decrease in blood pressure? We want to consult and notify the healthcare provider. Several actions we can use to address all. We do want to consider ABCs. Is anything life-threatening? Airway, breathing, circulation. We want to consider, is this an expected versus an unexpected outcome? And then Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If a person has, an issue with shelter, food, then the other things on Maslow's hierarchy of needs are put on hold. We want to meet those basic needs first. Moral distress occurs when a nurse knows the ethically correct action, but feels powerless to act due to institutional or legal constraints.